So basically, obviously, last week the title race was ended, so now we really fully focus on the relegation battle. So it's time to look at everything that happened in Bundesliga Matchday 25. Now, speaking of Bayern, they did play on Friday and they played their traditional, or was once their traditional bogey team, Borussia Mönchengladbach. However, the results over the past few years have shown that, sadly, bogey team no more, because Gladbach are just shit. So they're not at the level now where they're able to compete with Bayern. Ironically, it's since Gerardo Seoane took charge that this has been the case, because before that, Gladbach were going toe-to-toe with Bayern no matter what happened in these games. But then Seoane takes charge and it's downhill from here. But this was a comfortable win for Bayern. Luis Diaz scored and then assisted the second. Then Jamal Musiala scored his first goal since returning from his injury, which was a penalty, and then Nicholas Jackson scored right at the end. Gladbach also scored from João Mahoya. Mahoya's goal actually makes him the youngest ever player to score for Gladbach in the Bundesliga. It was a record that's been going for 30 years now, or just over. But the main takeaways for this game is it may be over for Manuel Neuer. I mean, he missed last week, then he comes back for this game and goes off at halftime with an injury. And then Jonas Obi comes on and replaces him. So with this and with Neuer's lack of reliability when it comes to being injury-free, is probably getting to the point now where you move on from Manuel Neuer and you go full Jonas Obi, because it's getting to the point it's rather unsustainable, and you might as well just fully trust Neuer or Obi now, and maybe Neuer continues or he retires in the summer. But I think with how things are going and how the past couple of weeks have panned out, I wouldn't be surprised if Neuer retires. Then obviously the beginning of the week was Julian Nagelsmann did an interview with Kicker where he gave some questionable comments. Questionable as in the fact he said like Leon Goretzka will start for Germany was likely to start for Germany at the World Cup. He's also said he's going to bring in Leroy Sané for the March international break, even though you've got players in much better form like Jamie Lieberling and Kevin Schade available. But now I'm not saying Goretzka deserves to play for Germany, but he did kind of justify Nagelsmann's comments a bit with his performance against Gladbach. Like overall, it was quite a good performance from Goretzka. I still don't think he deserves to play for Germany at the World Cup, especially with how Nagelsmann then comes out saying we've got players of all similar profiles, which is wrong. And then he also basically shuts down the prospect of calling up Anton Stach, who's playing quite well for Leeds at the moment. And then speaking of a German midfielder, then we turn to the story of Rocco Reitz. So in this game, I think by the letter of the law, so Reitz was sent off, which led to the penalty. By the letter of the law, okay, it's probably red, but I think I'm not considering this, but when you look at the situation and how it unfolded, Jackson was able to get a shot off, and it was more of a case that Jackson initially was pulling Reitz down, and then it didn't really impede Jackson as much as possible. Then, when it comes to Reitz, the day after, or 2 days after, it emerged that he has agreed personal terms with RB Leipzig of a potential move in the summer. Now, I think, obviously Reitz is a captain, he's born in Mönchengladbach or just outside. He's been a member of the club since he was a child, since he was born in fact. He's came through the academy, and he's obviously captain now too. And so, you've completed the journey, of course, like your progression into the club. Granted, like Gladbach is shit at the moment, and there is a real chance they could be relegated. But to allow this to play out, granted it's a league, so you don't really have total control over it. But to allow this to come out in the public, when Gladbach are playing horrible, when you're captain, it's already a bad look that you're looking to leave with the ship before the ship could potentially go down. Obviously, there's a Gladbach could stay up this season. But then it to be revealed that it's RB Leipzig of all teams that you're open to, that you're trying to join, any sort of goodwill or hope that you had is basically ruined. And I think it's hard to expect like the fans and stuff to actually care now if you decide to pursue this, especially moving to Leipzig of all teams, because obviously Leipzig, as we know, are the epitome of German football. And so to go from Gladbach, this big traditional club, to then Leipzig, it is quite questionable. And then it's also questionable whether he even will be a starter in that team, because the way they're going at the moment, okay, Schlager's leaving. It's said that Rice is meant to be the replacement for Campbell. But if you look at the three in midfield, Seiwald, do you think going off this season, and if everyone's fit, Seiwald, Baumgartner, and then Udre-Ogun. And so Rice is literally just going to be on the bench. So it really does make the move quite questionable. Add to that is the fact that Leipzig aren't even guaranteed European football this season yet. They could easily drop out of. They're not guaranteed Champions League football. They could still end up in, they're likely to end up in at least the Conference League. But like, if it's not guaranteed Champions League football, then what's the point? So overall, I don't really think the move makes sense, both from a what the hell are you doing? You're just burning your legacy point of view, as well as from like a pure footballing point of view as well. It's just rather pointless. So on Saturday, the first game we'll actually look at is Wolfsburg versus Hamburg. So Hamburg won this 2-1. This was a game with 3 penalties. Christian Eriksen scored first, and Vuskovic was fouled, and then scored the resultant penalty. And then Vuskovic was fouled again, and then up steps unlikely hero, who only a matter of weeks ago was suspended by the club for drink driving, Jean-Luc Dompe. So what that does is that actually gives Hamburg a decent buffer now to the relegation zone. And I feel it'd be very, like, you would need a monumental drop-off from Hamburg for them to actually get relegated. While for Wolfsburg, this is pretty damning. I mean, they've now dropped they were 17th going into this, and they stayed 17th, and because of the results elsewhere, it is actually got worse for them as well. So what did they do? They sacked Daniel Bauer, the head coach, and Christensen, the director of sport. And what they've done is they've replaced Christensen with Diego Benaglio, who, if you're Bundesliga sicko, he was the goalkeeper for the Wolfsburg side 10 years ago. And they've also brought back that manager from 10 years ago as well, Dieter Hecking, in an attempt to save them from relegation. Obviously, Hecking's last job was at Bochum, where they got relegated. But obviously, yes, they did end up getting relegated. And it was an old, decrepit team, more or less. But this was a Hecking who did mastermind like some decent results with Bochum. I think they drew or beat Dortmund. They drew with Leverkusen. They beat Bayern Munich. You know, they put in some pretty commendable results despite ending up going down. But I think, so the gap is currently 4 points to safety. And the Wolfsburg have a pretty tough run of fixtures. I mean, between now and the end of the season, they play Hoffenheim, Leverkusen, Frankfurt, Union away, which is not an easy place to go, Freiburg, and then Bayern Munich. And then the teams around them that they play are Werder Bremen, Gladbach, Union kind of, and then St. Pauli on the final game of the season. So it's really not an easy run for Wolfsburg. And with that, I think it could easily open the door for them to get relegated. And like, it's just a team that was so void of confidence. With this run of fixtures, you find it very difficult to think, yeah, they're just, despite, actually part of me thinks, you know, a bit like Hoffenheim last year, I think they're too good to go down. I think the quality that they have, it's very hard for them to get relegated. I mean, you've got Christian Eriksen, for example. But as I said, and I've previously said, I would obviously like Wolfsburg to go down. Forget the fact that they previously won the Bundesliga. They're still not, I don't think you could easily sacrifice them for the likes of Schalke, especially because they've just been so mediocre. For the past 5 years, they've coasted. They obviously have been over plenty of time how they spend large amounts of money and get nothing in return from it. Like, I mean, most of the players they signed in this summer, or this past window, have been failure. I mean, Shiogai has looked okay. Eriksen obviously took a while to get going because he didn't have a pre-season. But then pretty much everyone else has been really bang average. I don't know whether Hecking has it in him to turn things around. And if he does, I mean, chapeau. But most of the teams you're playing against are winning now, but most of the teams, as in like your rivals, are winning now, and they're building confidence and they're having these positive runs, and you're not. And as things go on, that gap is going to continue to grow. And as you have these difficult run of games and you're not building this confidence, then things are not likely going to turn around for you. And I just feel Wolfsburg are in a hole, and that hole is, I think it's just too deep for them to get out of it. And I feel, as much as I rate Hecking because he did win at Gladbach, I just feel like it's a step too far for both the club and him. Or maybe Felix Magath would have been a better choice, because he's genuinely a hard bastard who will like make this team do the dirty work that they need to do. But I think Hecking, he's not so much that guy. I mean, like you could probably compare them to two different grandparents. One's a nice one and the other's strict. The game of the weekend was most likely Freiburg versus Leverkusen. It ended 3-3. Obviously Leverkusen in the Champions League this week against Arsenal, and this was not ideal. Like, they were just far too open, and Freiburg had plenty of chances. Luckily you're playing Arsenal, so most of your problems are going to come from set pieces. But Leverkusen were far too open. Freiburg cut through them plenty of times. I mean, Grifo opened the Granted, Leverkusen did well to come from behind twice to make it 2-2 at half time. However, they were kind of playing with fire this whole time. Grifo opened the scoring, Kafana equalised literally 2 minutes later, then Suzuki scored for Freiburg, and then just before half time, Gramado scored a free kick. And then just after half time, Terrier scored, but then right at the end of the game, Matthias Ginter rescued a point for Freiburg. But Ginter also scored again, but the goal was ruled out for offside. So it saved Leverkusen more or less. But again, like, Leverkusen have looked really tired and kind of dull in the past few weeks. Like, the performances haven't been convincing at all. They may have won games, like against Werder Bremen, for example, but like, they've lost or dropped points in games they should have won. Last week against Mainz, the weekend before that against Union Berlin, Gramado's come out and said that we're tired and we've run out of energy. Maybe this, obviously massive turnover in the summer, maybe this squad is simply too raw for playing on three fronts. I mean, Leverkusen are in the semi-finals of the Champions League too, or in the Conference League, DFB Pokal. And so you've got all these games piling up, and they have a bunch of injuries as well, and they've had injuries throughout the season. And you've got all these young players who are still adapting, and some of them haven't been that good, Ben Sagir, for example. And so now you're kind of just trudging along, hoping something will come out of it. But then as this happens, you're going to slowly lose track with the top four, and then you're going to end up in the Europa League or the Conference League, for example. But what has helped Leverkusen is the fact that Stuttgart also dropped points. They played Mainz. They ended up drawing 2-2. This is a big point for Mainz because they now have a 4-point gap over Wolfsburg. They could have really killed this game off before Stuttgart was able to come back. They missed two really good chances. Philip Tietz took too long, and Jeremy Jacques blocked his open goal shot. And then literally right after that, Paul Nabel then hit the post. So that would have really killed the game off for Mainz and would have been a big win for them. But Stuttgart were able to come back in. But actually before that, Stuttgart were really dominant as well. Mainz will be happy with the point, but feel like they should have had more, or could have came away with more, while Stuttgart will be disappointed with the point and feel like they should have came away with more. Because they were dominant throughout. Then they take this lead, Deniz Undav and then Demirovic and Undav, and then they throw it away with a late goal. And so that meant they ended up dropping out of they stayed fourth, but they've lost pace with Hoffenheim. But I did think Undav has shown, again going back to the questionable Julian Nagelsmann comments, that Undav should play for Germany. He should start for Germany, in fact, whether that be as the striker or behind the striker. Because at Stuttgart he's been playing behind the striker, behind Demirovic, whereas he can also play as the striker. Obviously, Nick Woltemade is dealing with some form problems at Newcastle, where Kai Havertz is coming back from injury. And I feel, then you look at the other German strikers, Burkhardt is, again, also still roughly coming back from injury. Niklas Füllkrug isn't good enough anymore. And you have Undav, he's the highest scoring German in the Bundesliga and second highest scorer in the Bundesliga behind Harry Kane. And I think you can question a manager if you decide to not play or start your most informed striker for your nation for whatever reason. Because there's a world where Florian Wirtz and Jamal Musiala will play on the left and the right. A bit so going back to how they played the Euros, Wirtz and Musiala will play on the left and the right. Then you've got two more positions to fill. You can either play Undav in between them and then have the likes of Nick Woltemade up front. Obviously, they know each other from Stuttgart. Or you play Undav as the striker and then you bring either Wirtz or Musiala in and you play a winger like Lieveling, for example. Those are the options that you should be considering instead of going with like, oh, let's play Havertz, who hasn't played for the national team since November in 2024. So like, why? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. Undav should start, and if he's not, then you can add this to the next list of how in the past few weeks Nagelsmann has really made people question why is he the head coach. Obviously, on the Champions League places, Leipzig are now level on points with Augsburg level on points with Stuttgart after they beat Augsburg 2-1. They did leave it late. They did also have to come from behind. They did need an own goal to win it. But Augsburg will probably feel they deserve at least a point from this. I mean, it was again another strong performance from Leipzig. And under Manuel Baum, they've had a pretty good run of fixtures. I mean, they're still in the top half. They're ninth, 31 points, only 4 points behind Eintracht Frankfurt in 7th. So they've really been able to turn things around under Baum. It's a shame because one of the other teams, you know, that you would like to see relegated is probably Augsburg. And then the other Champions League spot was between, obviously, Hoffenheim remained third. They beat Heidenheim 4-2. So they have 2-point gap now between Stuttgart and Leipzig. While Heidenheim, I think it's safe to say they are basically relegated now. I think they're mentally in the process of checking out. I mean, they're 6 points behind Wolfsburg, but 10 points behind St. Pauli, and we have 9 games remaining. I think they're getting that they are relegated. Like it's obviously not going to be confirmed for a while, but I would comfortably say that they're probably getting or they've checked out and they're going like, okay, we are getting relegated. Then the evening game was between Dortmund and Cologne. Dortmund won this 2-1, but again, like Dortmund are basically in no man's land now. They're 6 points clear of third, and then they're way behind Bayern. So like they've really got nothing to be worried about. It was a poor performance from Dortmund. They did get the job done. Siri Guirassy opened the scoring in the first half. Then Cologne's Jamal Simpson-Puse, however you say it, was sent off just before half time. And Bayer scored in the second half. And then Jakub Kaminski ended it. And it was scored late on to give Cologne some hope. And then there was a questionable penalty call right at the end, which may have cost Cologne. But now Cologne are in danger of the relegation fight. They are on 24 points too. From 16th to 12th, they're only separated by a point. And so that should tell you everything you need to. And this is obviously a big story around this game is the fact that the DFB are now investigating the Cologne stadium announcer because he came out after the game on the tannoy and said like this decision at the end of the game was really questionable. Yeah, so he called the decision disgusting over the like PA system at the Rhein-Energies Stadium, which I think is funny. Obviously, it's highly unprofessional, but it's also quite funny. But yeah, Cologne, like they've got a big game against Hamburg this weekend, and after they played Borussia Mönchengladbach. So 2 big games when it comes to like your 5, especially against Gladbach, because they are not only your rival, they are also your relegation rival. St. Pauli and Frankfurt played out a 0-0 draw. Again, it's 0-0. There's not really a lot I can say, but in the grand scheme of things, it was a point gained for St. Pauli on Wolfsburg, which is the most important thing, because when you're in a relegation fight, you're just every point matters, and so that's a big point for St. Pauli. And to end this, we go to another relegation game, and that was between Union and Werder Bremen. And Werder Bremen are now out of the bottom 3 after they put in a very convincing performance and won 4-1. And so what that means is they're now up to 13th, and they obviously have a favourable run of fixtures ahead of them. And so to go to Union and win like quite convincingly, it will give you a really big boost of confidence. And now if you can ride that wave for the rest of these next difficult few games, difficult in the context of your situation, then by the end of it, Bremen may have done enough to survive. I mean, they play Mainz, then Wolfsburg, then they have Leipzig, but then play Cologne again, Hamburg, then they've got some games against Stuttgart, Augsburg, Hoffenheim, and then Dortmund. So they have a difficult end to the season, like the difficult final 4 games, but the next 5 could do the job, especially when you consider the other teams around them. If they come away with a positive result in those 5 games, so Leipzig is one of them. If they lose that game, fair enough. But if you beat Mainz, Wolfsburg, Cologne, and Hamburg, or get a point or some positive points against the likes of Hamburg, for example, then that should be enough, and Bremen should stay up. But then it comes to the question of, could this have happened under Horst Steffen? Did you just make an unjustifiable decision for no real reason? So yeah, obviously now with the table at the top, Bayern 11 points clear of Dortmund to a second, Hoffenheim a third, Stuttgart a fourth, Leipzig a fifth, and Leverkusen a sixth on 44 points. Then obviously at the bottom, Heidenheim at 18th and 14, Wolfsburg at 17th on 20, Cologne, Mainz and St. Pauli are all level on 24 points. And so next weekend it is obviously the big game in terms of teams related is Leverkusen versus Bayern at home. Obviously precursor to the DFB Pokal next month. Then Stuttgart against Leipzig as well. But in the context of the bottom of the table, Gladbach versus St. Pauli, Hamburg versus Cologne, Werder Bremen versus Mainz as well. And then you've got Wolfsburg's first game under Dieter Hecking. These are all big games in the context of the bottom of the table, and it can really shake things up depending on the results. I mean, one team that looks slightly away from it could be sucked into it immediately. While vice versa, a team that looks sucked into it could move themselves away. So let me know what you think about the relegation fight, the teams involved, and just really everything else too.